Hello everyone. Today's lesson is going to be on converting percents to fractions and then the other way around, fractions to percents. This is right out of Big Ideas Math, the Green Book, Chapter 5, Section 5. First thing we have to make sure we understand when working with percents is what is a percent. And the word percent literally means per 100. Because the word cent means 100. Now, other ways of saying per 100 is we can say over 100. We could say for every 100. Okay, and that's just replacing that per. Now, what I really want you to think about is like when you get scores on homework and tests. And the reason I bring those up is because oftentimes how many points a homework assignment is less than how many points a test is, being that the tests are usually bigger, a little bit more serious. However, anytime that I say, oh, you got a 90% on this homework, or oh, you got a 90% on the test, 90% always means an A. That's a good thing. But if on a homework you get a 9 out of 10, I say, yeah, you got a 9. A lot of times your guys' first question is, well, what's it out of? Knowing that important of, we have to make that comparison. So, and that's what a percent is. It's that ratio of, for homework purposes, how many you got correct out of how many points there were. A 9 out of 50 is not a good score, so percents help us just keep everything kind of the same across the board. We always know, 100% means you got everything correct, no matter if that's a 10-point homework assignment or a 50-point test. So converting between a percent and a fraction doesn't have a lot of steps. We're keeping it pretty simple to start us off. The first thing you're always going to do is to write the percent over 100. The next step is to simplify the fraction. Now, if we flip this around and we're going the other way, if we're starting at a fraction and going to percent, that would imply that we have to take that fraction, make it over 100 by multiplying, and then that's our percent. So let's look at some examples. So I made a little chart for us to work through a couple examples. In all these problems, we are going to start, we know what the percent is. So the first thing that you should always do if you're trying to make it into a fraction is you're going to take the percent and you're literally just going to put it over 100. So since this first one is 90%, that means 90 over 100. From there, we just simplified our fraction, which is something we have been working on throughout the year. So I look at 90 over 100, and I know I can divide both of these by 10, because they both end with a 0. 90 divided by 10 would be 9, and 100 divided by 10, would be 10. I cannot simplify 9/10 any further, so that's the fraction form of 90%. Our next example is 8%. In this problem, it's still just take that percent and write it exactly over 100. So 8% has become 8 over 100. Now we need to look at both these numbers and what is the biggest number that can divide 8 and 100. So my strategy is I always look at the smaller number. So I look at 8 and I know I can divide 8 by numbers like 1, 2, 4, and 8. I also know that 8 does not go into 100, so I would try maybe dividing by 4, and I know both of these can be divided by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 100 divided by 4 is 25. I cannot simplify that any further, so 8% is the same as 8/25. And our last example in this set is 160%, and I purposely picked this one because since it's over 100%, that means that we have over kind of our whole. We got extra credit or something. You still solve it the same way. This is still going to start out as 160 over 100. Okay, we don't need to put it over 1,000 or anything like that, because if it says that if it has that percent sign, it means over 100. From here, I can simplify. I might start by, many of us would maybe divide this out by 10. I know that would give me 16/10, which is not fully simplified though, because I have two even numbers. So from there, I might divide both of these by 2 to give me 8/5, which is the same as 1 3/5, but I can leave it in that improper fraction form. So what could I have divided by? So I started off dividing by 10, but that didn't simplify it all in one. What could I have divided by? Hopefully you said 20. If I had divided 160 by 20, that would give me 8. 100 divided by 20 gives me 5. Okay? On the next slide, or the next set of practice problems, we're going to try flip this around and simplify and take simplified fractions and make them percents. For these next three problems, we are going to be starting with our simplified fraction. We are going to make it into a fraction over 100, which then will help us tell us our percent. So to start off, we're starting with 3/5. So how can we make 3/5 over 100? In this case, we would multiply both 3 and 5 by 20. So we're essentially multiplying by 20 over 20, which, as a reminder, the reason that works is because 20 over 20 is the same as 1. And by multiplying by 1, we're not changing anything other than the way it looks. So 3 times 20 gives me 60. 5 times 20 gives me 100. And since I have 60 over 100, that means 60%. Let's try the next one. This time we have a denominator of 20, so what would I have to multiply 17 and 20 by? Let's multiply by 5/5, because 20 times 5 would give me that 100. 17 times 5 is 85, which means what percent? 85%. Alright, I made a real quick change to our third problem here. I wanted to change it up a little bit. So for this next fraction, we have 31/25. We are still trying to get to that fraction of over 100. So what are we going to multiply by this time? So our main focus, how do I go from 25 to 100? Well, I would have to multiply by 4. So what I do to the bottom, I'm going to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply by 4 over 4. 31 times 4 would be 124 over 100, which makes this 124%. So the main step, if you can come away with this lesson with anything, is really this in between here. Anytime we're going from percent to fraction or fraction to percent, if we can get that over 100, that's going to make it a lot easier to kind of convert between. Now, not every number nicely goes into 100. Let's explore that on the next problem. Okay, for our next problem, we are going to look at the fraction 3/8. And there's plenty of fractions where this sort of situation applies, but I'm just going to keep it focused on one. So we want to know what is 3/8 as a percent. But our problem is we know that 8 I can't multiply it by a whole number and make 100. So here's another strategy you can try. Is we can actually multiply the numerator and the denominator by 100. 100 over 100. That would give us the fraction 300 over 800, which we're a little too big. But now, what can I divide both of these by to get to 100? Oh, now I can divide by 8 over 8. So see how we kind of did that trick? So to get that 100 in there, we multiplied by it, and then we divide by the other number, or kind of our starting number, and get. So this is where kind of a calculator would help you as well. 300 divided by 8 just so happens to be 37.5. Now, we don't like decimals in fractions, so having this fraction 37.5/100ths, that's not a good fraction. But the good thing is we didn't want it as a fraction. We just wanted to know that end percent, and that percent would be 37.5%, which is an okay percent. You are allowed to have decimals in a percent. So if you encounter a fraction that does not nicely make or go directly to that 100, one little trick that you can do is you can multiply by 100 over 100, and then you divide by whatever that original denominator was. You can take that and divide both numerator and denominator. You will then be at the over 100. Okay? So we won't have a lot of these sorts of fractions, but it's good to know. And in our next section, we're going to learn another strategy about making these fractions into percents.